Hey, I'm Max Becker. I host Sporting Max, and I'm the host of the Kids Edition on SEN every Sunday morning. And you're listening to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself.
Max, welcome to the show, brother.
Danny, it's great to be on here. Love your show, love listening to yourself, and it was great to have you on my pod, and great to see you again.
Mate, first question for you is how come you're not in school? It's a Friday morning.
Well, Boomers were on this week, obviously, so I got my dad to email my homeroom teacher, and he sent a photo of my media accreditation for the Boomers vs. the World series this week, and he said, is it okay if Max is going to be here in the city for the week, because I live down sort of Geelong way, and my homeroom teacher replied, he said, yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for Max. He goes, I can't wait to chat with him next Monday when I see him. So I was like, awesome, I get to, be around all the Boomers guys and get to sit with guys like Olgun Ulich and Tom Hirsch and stuff like that, and the amount of things you learn from them is incredible.
That's awesome, mate. So for the listeners or those that are watching at the moment, how old are you?
16 right now, yeah.
16. And how long have you been in media for?
So I think it's about 3 years now.
So you started when you were 13, 14?
13, yeah. I think I was 13, yeah.
That's awesome, man. So I think the question that a lot of people would be thinking at the moment is, how did you even find yourself in that position? So how did you get the gig? Being in an SEN, all that type of stuff. Like, what was the thing that even sparked your interest in trying to get a career in media? Yes,
obviously it was COVID and start of COVID, and we were all in lockdown. And I found it fascinating how sports were affected by it, and how the NBA and basketball was all just shutting down. So I just found my dad's Blue Yeti mic, and I thought I'll start a podcast. So I originally just started the first 2 episodes, I think it was 15 minutes an episode, talking about how different sports have been affected by COVID, for example, the NBA, and how the competition may look, and the AFL in different ways, and how they could incorporate and fan engagement and stuff like that. Different strategies they might be able to use. But then I was discussing with a couple of different people, and my uncle was best mates with Lee Jecker, so shout out to Lee. He used to play for the Brisbane Bullets, and he was MVP of the German League, I think it was a couple of years ago now, maybe 10 years ago. And so I just got him on, and he's best mates with the Boston Celtics scout, Benes Makovicius. So I'm like, oh, this is unreal. Like, I'm about to be like 3 episodes in, and I'm talking to the Boston Celtics scout. Like, this is unbelievable. So I had him on, and then one of my other uncles' best mates is Steel Sidebottom.
Yeah,
so, and
nice.
The year before that, he'd come like 2nd or 3rd in the Brownlow. So I'm like, oh, this is just going to another level.
Yeah.
And originally I was like, I'm a kid. I was like I'm still a kid, but obviously 13. At 13, you're thinking all I want to be is like a basketballer or a footballer and things like that. So I was like looking for like tips from like these people and athletes and coaches and everyone on like how I can improve like my basketball game, like what tips can I get from you in terms of like nutrition and fitness and workouts and stuff like that. And then it wasn't really until I got, probably 20 to 30 episodes in that I was like, this is what I want to do. And I'm really enjoying this, so I'm going to really knuckle down and get to work. And once I got to episode 49, I think I had Mark Howard on that episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I had a chat to him, and how he was really good at giving me tips, and still does now, like advice and stuff on how to improve my craft. Not only in terms of like interview questions, but broadcasting too. And then episode 50, I sent Craig Hutchison just an email. I found his Instagram, and there was an email attached to it. And I thought, oh, sweet, I'll send Hutchie an email. And so I wasn't expecting a reply or anything. I'd left my phone at home, and I got back from the city one morning, and I checked my phone, and because it's like, how you have your Apple Mail and Gmail?
Yep.
I usually don't have any emails on my Apple Mail at all. And I saw this like little red circle with a 1 in the corner. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, surely not. And so like my heart's beating, and my legs and arms are all feeling like jelly, and I scroll across, I click on it, and I see Craig Hutchison sent me an email back. He goes, hey Max, love what you're doing, love to jump on. And
unreal.
That was like, for me, that was like one of the best moments ever. Like, I was living on that high for like a week straight, like, this is unreal, like, this is unbelievable, I can't believe this is happening.
Would have been a
And
pretty
then-
elite story for show and tell at school.
Yeah. A couple of my mates couldn't believe it, and I think it was, I kind of kept it to myself a bit, keep it under the radar a bit. But then I got Hutchie on, and I think the thing that sparked his interest most was I asked him about the merger between Pacific Star Network, Croc Media, and SEN. And
He wouldn't have been expecting that.
no, he wasn't, because he was on holiday, right? He was on holiday with his family and his stepson at the time. And I was like, he was like, his jaw dropped for a sec. And I was like, okay, like, I'm in here. And then so I kept emailing him and his assistant, Amanda, who's fantastic, like one of the best human beings you'll ever meet. And just to see if I could get Sporting Max on the SEN app. And then so Sam Thompson, the national radio director of SEN, reached out to me and she goes, hey, I'd like to set up a meeting. We'd like to get you into SEN and have a chat. So I got my manager, Chris, and my dad. We all went in there.
So wait. Rewind a little bit there. You had a manager already? Or you just signed a manager before this conversation?
No, I had a manager already.
Oh, unreal.
So it was pretty insane.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, so we went in with Sam, and we were only trying to get, that was our aim goal and main goal, to get Sporting Max on the SEN app. So when you go to their podcast section, that's what shows up.
Shows up, yeah.
And I walked in there, saw Hutchie, saw them all, and Sam's like, oh, I've listened to your podcast, love what you're doing. She's like, we can get Sporting Max on air from 7 to 8 a.m. every Sunday. And we walked away. From that, Dad and I were driving straight up to Queensland for a holiday over summer, like 15-hour trip. So me and Dad in the car, I'm like, okay, I'll have a couple of Diet Cokes on the way, and it was just unreal.
That's incredible, Max. So what actually, so when you started out the podcast, were you playing sport at the time?
Yeah, I was playing basketball and footy. So
initially it was kind of, as you said before, more so just like getting some insight into training, nutrition, and just the world of a professional athlete. And then before that, were you interested at all in the media side, or like had you watched any, whether it be commentators or people in media that you found interesting, or did that kind of develop as you started the pod?
I think I'd always taken an interest in like Dennis Cometti and Bruce McAvaney and BT and Mark Howard and Anthony Hudson and Waitley, and I was pretty inspired by them and like loved how they commentate, and I was like, oh yeah, like that's cool, like that'd be awesome to do. But I don't think it ever really came to realisation for me.
100%. So when you started, so you had that conversation, they said they want to get you on air. What was the first day like heading into SEN? It would have felt pretty surreal when you're going in to be live on air. I've been fortunate enough to come on your show a couple of times. We did the podcast, and then we did the live show, which was awesome. And you absolutely crushed it. And I was super impressed after our first one. But what was that first day like? Were you pretty nervous?
Well, first of all, you were incredible on my podcast. I got like heaps of emails and messages going, how good was this episode? I had people like sharing it on Facebook and things going, this is like an incredible chat and Danny's awesome and things like that. And so that was like, that's probably one of the highlights. So for having you on, like from I think episode 20, that's been probably one of my goals to get you on, because you're obviously like fitness and nutrition and stuff like that. That was something that I've always sort of prided myself on in a way. And so first day at SEN was about February, and I had an interview with Steele Sidebottom again, and I'd already had him on twice. I said, come into the SEN studio. I said, we'll have a chat. And Steele, at this point, didn't do too many interviews or podcasts and things like that. So it was like, okay, this is big, not only for me, but like sort of for him too, I guess, in a way. So for me, it was trying to make both feel comfortable where it can sort of naturally flow in a conversation. It was a bit of a 2022 season preview, which was great to chat with Steele, and he's a great person.
That's awesome. When you have guests come in that maybe haven't seen much of your work before, do you feel like people kind of come in with uncertainty as to how, like, the professionalism of it, or what's the response you usually get from guests when they come in?
Yeah, I think it can vary sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find it really funny, like when people's jaws drop or they stop for a sec. Like I did the press conference last night for the Boomers, and Brian Gordon was there with Do It Breathe, and I was like, and because everyone's like fighting over who's going to take the next question. So you have to jump in like really early.
Yeah.
So Gorge was like coming to the end of his question. He was like on the last word. I'm like, Gorge. And I'm like, Gorge, can you tell me what you found out most about the squad through these 3 warm-up games? And he's like, he took a big breath and he thought for another sec. He's like, he's like, that's a great question. And then he's like, I think I found out like the blueprint that the Boomers in general have to play and different rotations and things like that, which is like perfect for like what I want to use to write and put on socials and things like that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so some people don't sometimes realise, but then I feel like if I can make a connection with a guest before we go to air or before I record, it helps with natural conversation. So if we can have a bit of a laugh before or things like that.
Build a bit of rapport with them first.
It really helps ease them into the interview.
Do you get nervous before, like you just mentioned last night, doing a press conference for the Boomers, which is huge? Do you get nervous before those things, or do you? I guess the second part of that question would be, how much prep do you do before an interview or before going to a press conference or before attending a media event or whatever to make sure that you're prepared and confident in yourself and your questions?
It depends on like what event it is. For like a press conference, I'll probably like write notes throughout the game in like a notebook or on my computer or something like that. For an interview, I'll probably do maybe 2 hours worth of research just for that interview. And then if I'm hosting an event or something like that, I'll probably do more than that, because obviously you got a live crowd and you need to make sure you're well researched and over everything. But like in terms of like nerves, I don't get too nervous. I try and hype myself up with some music or things like that.
What's the go-to playlist?
I'm more like I find like Michael Jackson like gets me like fired up, and that I can just like hype myself to. Like, so I find that like really, I find it really like encouraging for me just to get in the mood, which has been really good.
Awesome.
To get myself ready.
That's brilliant. So what type of stuff do you focus in on now? So when you look at, you've got your show on SEN, you've got your podcast, you've got a lot of experience now, even though you're only 16. What are some of the things that you focus in on in trying to, master your craft? Like, are you doing extra work when you're at home around like communication skills? Is it studying other people in media and commentators? Is it like, what are the things that you feel like you need to work on most to make sure that you can continue to grow?
Probably for me at the moment, it's probably listening to different interviews like yours and seeing how different people do it and trying to work different bits and pieces into my own craft. That's probably something that I'm focused on at the moment. The other side is broadcasting and things like that. So I've done a bit of play-by-play commentary for the Melbourne Tigers and the Geelong Supercats in the past few NBL 1 seasons, which has been an incredible experience.
Yeah.
And obviously, I know like a fair few of the guys from the Tigers, like Mason Gaze, and I know Drewy and Wazakitty. So whenever I can get to those games and do them, I get like a lot of insight from all those guys, which is like incredible. And to be able to know someone like Mason Gaze and like chat to him, and like I didn't realise like how good his basketball brain was until I like actually sat down and had a great chat with him like in an interview, and his basketball brain's like out of this mind. Like I'm thinking right now, I think he's 22, 23 right now. Like how's this kid not got an NBL contract yet, or even like as a training player? He's just incredible. I put a post out on Instagram like after I went to one of the games. It was the 1993 Championship reunion, and I tagged Melbourne United, tagged Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. I'm like, you guys have to sign Mason Gaze up.
That's awesome. Do you find, is there a sport in particular that you prefer to either comment, like do the play-by-play or to report on with media stuff? Is there a sport in particular that you enjoy more than others, like footy, basketball? Is there sports that you don't enjoy kind of getting involved in?
Probably anything. I'm really happy to cover anything and everything. Probably my main 3 at the moment are cricket, basketball and footy. Like those are the 3 that I'm probably purely focused on, and my craft in that area too. And like I mentioned before, play-by-play commentary. Like I can't watch like basketball or footy without like commentating it in my head, like without play-by-play commentating it in my head. And sometimes it gets annoying. It's like I'm trying to watch the footy, but in my head, it's like I'm still play-by-play commentating it. So I'm watching the footy, I'm watching the Saints. I'm a massive Saints fan. And I'm going, here's Gresham. He's got the ball. All right, who's got the ball next? He launches the ball inside 50 metres out. King's taken a clunk. He's clunked the mark 50 metres out. He'll set sail for a massive kick. And I can't, and then sometimes I'll think like, all right, I've got to stop. I've got to just try and...
Just watch it.
Just watch it and just try and enjoy it. But at the same time, sometimes I laugh at myself. And it gets, but it's funny.
That's awesome, brother. Is there anyone in the media that you mentioned a few names already that you've kind of taken inspiration from, but is there anyone that you use as a bit of a mentor or that you really like to listen to try and pick up on some of the things that they do and try and incorporate them into your own
Yeah, Joe
style?
Waitley's number one.
Joe Waitley?
Definitely. I think the way he prepares, and I've been lucky enough to like sit in and watch him prepare at SEN and stuff like that, and I think the amount of research and preparation he does is incredible, the way he goes about it and the way he calls the game. Like he's like, especially all these like good commentators like Bruce and Waitley in particular, they're really good at like sports all about moments. And so I think if you can call like those big moments really well, that's a massive key.
Is there any, let's say, like videos or moments from the past that you just absolutely love? So like, is there any games that come to mind or any sporting moments that really stick out to you that the commentary on it was something that you come back to and listen to often or that really sticks out?
There's a couple. So not so much the commentary, but in terms of the sporting moment, like this year, probably the Dan Houston goal against Essendon.
Yeah, we're gonna. For everyone listening, we're going to get Max to run through a couple of play-by-plays soon. But yeah, that was a pretty epic moment, wasn't it? Unfortunately, it was against the Bombers, which was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. Scott Boland's 6 wickets at the G's, and the commentary that Mark Howard to go with that, like, Boland's got 6 at the G, build the man a statue. That's probably like, when I think of commentary and what are the best commentary moments, that sticks out, or Dennis Cometti and he's came up behind him like a librarian.
What is that one?
That's when, I think it was Heath Shaw ran down Nick Rewalt on the goal line in the 2010 Grand Final. And to me as a Saints fan, that sticks out as a pretty vivid piece of commentary.
Fucking hell. So you're still in school, you're year 10?
Yeah, year 10, yeah.
So do you have, like, what does your week look like? Because I feel like obviously you've got a lot of commitments with the media stuff. It sounds like you're putting in a lot of time to master your craft and just learn more about about commentating and media and just sport in general. Is there much time to just be a kid and enjoy being a kid?
Yeah, there's surprisingly, for me, is still a bit like I get to hang out with my mates sometimes, which is awesome. And I play basketball too,
Awesome.
Which I absolutely love. And I still try and take little bits of interviews, like especially with basketballs and stuff like that I can do into my own game. So still trying to work on that. But I think for me, like school, I love being there to hang out with my mates. And my number one priority is that if I can get all my schoolwork done and keep my grades up, it allows me to be better, do better, and have more time for everything else.
That's unreal. That's really good to hear. What's the pathway look like for you from here? So you're 16 in year 10 at the moment, already got your own show on SEN. Podcast is absolutely pumping. You're attending big sporting events and getting to do media on those events. What does the next, say, 5 years look like for you and once you wrap up school and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, we just had our subject selection a couple of weeks ago. So for next year, year 11s and year 12, obviously, I want to do VCE. And I've chosen to do just general math because I still think that critical thinking, like part of everything in terms of business and things like that, is really important and vital going forward, and especially in media. I've chosen to do legal because I think it's good. You always need that legal side and negotiating and things like that in terms of business strategies and sponsorships and things like that. Business management, obviously, VCE PE, which is more theory based, and I think you do a double prac a week, which obviously is a no-brainer in terms of what I want to do. And I think I did English, and at our school, RE is not optional, so you have to do RE. But going forward, that's what the next 2 years looks like for me. And then I think I'm going to do uni, I'm hoping to go to Melbourne Uni, maybe. And I've had a look at a couple of their courses, and their Bachelor of Arts and majoring in media communications is probably the one I'm looking at the moment. And Xander Maguire, who's I believe he's the chief of sport at Nine at the moment, or senior footy kind of reporter. Xander Maguire, he's doing that. He's just finished that course at Melbourne Uni, so that's probably something I'm looking at.
And what does it look like? So let's say you've finished BCE, you're doing your uni degree and whatnot. Like, what does the end goal for you look like? Is it a full-time commentator gig with the AFL, NBL? Like, have you kind of thought that far yet?
Yeah, like at this stage, I want to do everything. Like everything and anything is like unbelievable and awesome. So for me, it's probably cricket, NBL, AFL. Those are the three that I really want to do. I'd love to commentate like a full Ashes series, like on home soil or on the ground in England, and that's something for me that is like would be a pinnacle of like a pinnacle moment, or even just to be at an Ashes game, which I haven't.
You
I haven't been able to go to one yet.
Nah.
But yeah, like an Ashes series, or be able to commentate the AFL, whether that's on radio or TV, and then obviously the NBL, and maybe, hopefully, I'm hoping potentially in the future get over to the States. Maybe
The NBA.
That's probably like a big goal of mine.
That's incredible. Has the support been from like your friends and family and stuff?
Yeah, really good. My dad's like probably the main one. He helps give me like a lot of support, a lot of advice. In terms of like if he thinks I've done a bad show, like I might get a little bit of a spray, and it's like this is what you have to work on for next week, and sort of we chat about
Constructive feedback.
Yeah, constructive feedback, and yeah, how I can work on this part going forward, which this year for the show I've particularly worked on it in the last few weeks. The show, like hooking at the end of each segment. So how we're leading to ad breaks, instead of saying we're going to take a break here on the Kids Edition, go coming up next on the Kids Edition we'll chat to such and such, or we'll chat about the Matildas. And
Before the ad break.
yeah, so to kind of keep the listener engaged, which has been something that I've probably focused on at the moment.
That's cool. So you're just continuing to just find the little areas that you can improve.
Yeah.
Must be pretty. Your mates at school must think it's pretty sweet. You've been live on air on SEN every weekend.
Sometimes I think one of my PE teachers, Mr. Waters, thinks it's cooler than a lot of other people. He's awesome, Mr. Waters. I had him for advanced PE last semester, and he's only a young guy. I think he's about 25, 26 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we just chat. We chat footy all the time. We get along pretty well, and he coaches. He's like a head coach of Belmont Lions down in Geelong. So we always chat about that. And one morning he called in to the studio on the phone, and the producers come in to me and Ali, and they're like, Max, we've got like a guy on the phone who says he's your PE teacher. His name's Matthew. And I'm going, yeah, Mr. Waters. And they're like, do you want us to put him through? I'm like, yeah, like chuck him through, chuck him on the line. And so he got on and he's like, Maxie, he's like, how you going, mate? I'm like, yeah, good, Waters, how are you? And he's like, mate, he's like, long time listener, first time caller. and I was like, yeah, mate, thanks for calling in. And then he asked me like a question about the Saints and how we think they went, and they had a shocker against Gold Coast that week. And I handballed that over to Ali, and I was chatting to him at school. He goes, mate, you handballed that over to Ali really well.
So you didn't have to answer it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think I was going to answer that.
Is there any moments from, whether it be your podcast or on air, that really stick out to you, whether it be an extremely funny moment or a moment that just sticks out to you from a guest in particular? Anything that really stands out?
Like when I think about like moments and things like that in terms of who I've interviewed, I probably think about like my interview with Waitley, and not only how many listens and like how much support that got, but just being there. And I remember him walking in, and I was pretty nervous, like my heart's racing, like my hands are shaking, and he walks around the corner. It's Thursday night. It was last year, so it was like, I think it was round 2 of the AFL season, and I think he had an apple and a banana in his hands because he was going to go to call the AFL Nation in the studio after this interview. And he walked around the corner. He said, "Hey Max, like, how are you?" And I'm like my jaw kind of dropped. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is actually happening. And when we got into the interview, that was like I had a smile on my face the whole time, and my excitement levels were so high that I couldn't believe just what was happening. And I was so grateful for that opportunity to be able to talk to Waitley.
That's incredible, mate, and very well deserved. What do you feel like's been some of the best feedback or constructive criticism, whether it be from your old man, whether it be from some of the guests that you've had on? Is there certain pieces of feedback that you feel like have really helped you in terms of being a better interviewer or a better broadcaster?
Yeah, one that sticks out to me is Mark Howard. And when I had him on afterwards, he's like, he goes, I love how you like scripted and you can take me through like a timeline and things like that, and you've got all your questions written out. He said, but if you can know that person's story fully and entirely before, they come on, and you can throw away that script, it helps the conversation flow much easier, which is something I feel I'm getting a bit better at now.
Yeah, I found the same thing with this podcast. When I first started, I would have all the questions
scripted out.
Like 21 questions.
Yeah.
And then even when I did the solo episodes, so this episode that we put out will probably be around maybe like 476 or something. So when probably like the first 50 to 100, whenever I did them by myself, I would have the whole episode written out in my notes.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
And I would try and pretend like I was just making it up on the spot.
Yeah, you're going off the...
But then I would struggle to bloody read what I'd written down anyway and sound absolutely ridiculous. And then with the guests, I would have the questions. And I was very similar. Like the best decision I made was doing more research before.
Yeah.
Or having a few touch points that I wanted to talk about, but just throwing away any of the questions that I'd written down really, and then just letting it free flow, because then the conversation's a lot more genuine. You don't miss out on all the little moments. And when you've got the questions down, you don't really listen to the answers because you're worried about what you're going to ask next.
Question, yeah.
And it doesn't flow as well, and you kind of miss out on some of the best stuff.
Yeah. How'd you find that sort of work?
Game changer. I think that was one of the best decisions I made, and that's when the podcast really started to grow a bit, I think, because you build a better relationship with the guest.
Yeah.
As you said, you get more value out of the episode, because there'll be some times where, let's say you were coming in today and I had a few things I wanted to talk to you about. Sometimes we won't even talk about them because better stuff comes up.
Yeah.
Or you go down a different angle, and you're more engaged, so you become more present with the guest, and the guest feels like you're actually engaged in the conversation, and instead of just continuing to look down at what you want to ask next. It feels a bit like Q&A-ish, but at the same time, like, because a lot of the guests that you would have on as well have probably done a shit ton of media in the past. Yeah. So if it's questions,
unique.
Yeah, exactly right. Like people could go to anyone's podcast or any media interview and hear those answers anywhere. Whereas if you can find like a really unique thing, and I think for the guest as well, what I've found is if I bring up something that is really different to what they would usually talk about, or something that's really personal to them that not many people would know. So whether it's reaching out to a guest who knows them, or reaching out to someone who knows them beforehand and saying, is there anything that I could ask them about or bring up that they would be shocked that I knew, or that might be a really good conversation, makes it really cool content. But then at the same time, that guest really feels valued and it sticks out to them. So they'll be a lot more likely to talk about it with other people or refer you on to someone else.
Have you got any good things from like sources or anything like that you've been able to bring up with guests?
Yeah, nothing. There's not many that I can't think of any off the top of my head. But what I'll usually do is I'll try and watch a lot of their interviews previously, but then I'll also do a bit of a deep dive on their social media, or just ask people that know them, and I'll try and come up with stuff that's the least obvious type of questions. Yeah. So again, if you're getting on, let's say you're getting on, what's a good example? Yeah, let's say we're chatting with Creaky. Yeah. Might ask him stuff that has nothing to do with basketball, or ask him stuff about from when him and I grew up together that a lot of people wouldn't know, or just random things that show the guests you're really genuinely interested and care, and stuff that you've actually taken the time to do some research on who they are and stuff about their story. And I find as well, if you can make it if you can ask a question that kind of plays with their emotions a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe a question that makes them really think or brings up some form of memory or an emotion from the past, whether it be good or bad.
Yeah.
It engages them a lot more in it, and you kind of get a side of them that not many people usually get to see. And then that's what people remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mate, we have a few sporting moments that we've got here that we're going to get you to do a live commentary for us, or a bit of a play-by-play. So we've got our 3 moments. So we've got, of course, Creaky's big, massive slam on Daly.
And Mason Peatling comes up from behind and says, "It's on my watch."
We've got that one. We've got the 5 wickets from, who is it?
Cam Green.
Cam Green, yep. And then we've got, unfortunately, I might cut this one out because it was against Essendon, but we've got Dan Houston's goal after the siren against the Bombers. So we're going to get you to run through them for us now, brother.
All right. So Cameron Green takes his 4th wicket on Boxing Day at the MCG with Kagisha Rabada. The celebrations about to begin for Australia. Back at the top of his mark, he steams into the crease. Straight bat, bowled him. Green, 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 green. He's got 5 on Boxing Day at the G. Australia win the series. South Africa bowled out for 189. Green, a bowling masterclass. 5 for 27. So a smirk grin on the face of Ken Hinkley. A shot after the siren for Dan Houston. It'll take his very best here. From 55 out, Dan Houston has launched a rocket straight through the middle. Is it touched? No. Port Adelaide know it. Essendon know it. He knows it. But the umpires don't. They celebrate, Butters and Horne-Francis amongst them. And the umpire, the goal umpire's got right under him. And the hearts break of Dylan Shields and the Bombers as Port Adelaide have won it by 4 points in an absolute thriller. Leafa up the floor, throws it to Creek, who takes flight. Oh! Throws it down in the celebration. He said, "See you later, Daly," and Peatling just came out and flogged him. And it's on for young and old. Newley and Daly and Agata are in there. Pinot comes in at the back. There's some punches being thrown. And Creek composes himself. Referee Chris Reed getting in amongst the action. Daly not happy. He said, "See you later." As we take a look at this replay in Leafa, Creek just took flight and posted on him. Not the head, and Peatling said, "I'm not copping any of that." And Creek was on a manhunt there for a minute as emotions boil over at John Cain Arena in the throwdown.
Mate, you've absolutely crushed that. How good. So do you reckon
Danny.
do you do that often? Like, when you're at home, do you ever kind of just bring up some old clips and have a practice on that stuff, particularly if you're about to go and do a play-by-play?
If I'm by myself, my sister doesn't like me talking out loud or trying to commentate it while I'm watching the footy. So if I'm by myself, watching it by myself, I'll commentate it out loud and I'll try and eclipse the moment and try and make those moments like special in my own way. But yeah, otherwise I'll just do it in my head.
Unreal. Is there, just on while we're on this topic, before we kind of wrap things up, is there you kind of mentioned it already, but is there any real big moments that really stick out in your mind where a certain commentator has just absolutely nailed it? Like, to me, I think of something like, Buddy running down the wing and snagging that goal. Like, that was a pretty memorable moment. But or even the West Coast and Sydney Grand Final when Leo Barry took that massive hanger to kind of seal the game. Any of those that really stick out for you?
Yes, it's probably that Leo Barry you star moment, or in the most recent years, it's Bowler's got 6 at the G, build the man a statue. I think that's something that for every cricket fan and everyone's favourite moments, called by Mark Howard. It was an incredible moment, and I think he called it like to perfection. It was 6. I think it was 6 for 7 or 6 for 5, and yeah, I was just in awe.
What advice do you have for anyone, whether they're someone similar to your age or whether it's someone a little older that's trying to get into the media space and start to build some traction and get their name out there with their work?
I think I'm not great at advice, but I think you just got to like keep working and keep going at it. I think like you got to set your mind to it. You have to set out a path. You have to set goals. You have to know what you want, and you have to hustle. And I think you have to go get it. And you have to know, and you have to take the bull by the horns to be able to set yourself a task and stick to it, and understand that there is going to be early mornings. Like I've had some interviews where I've had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to interview someone who's in the UK or who's in the States and things like that. And there might be some late nights. I interviewed Jackie Dover as a ref recently, and I think it was 10 p.m. here and it was 6 a.m. her time in New York, and which is a crazy, crazy time difference. But there's going to be some late nights and early mornings and some hard work. But yeah, I think if you can set yourself a task and stick to it, that's probably the main thing, and probably something that I pride myself on.
I think even for you, starting that podcast, I mean, who knows, most likely wouldn't be in the position you're in now if you hadn't taken the initiative to start that podcast in the first place, which is, coming back to that, is absolutely crazy that at that age, around 13 at the time?
At 13, yeah.
You've just, decided that I'm going to start a podcast, which is crazy enough as it is, but can you explain a little bit how you even figured out how to start a podcast? And launch it all and stuff? Like, I mean, because at that age, most kids 13 years old aren't trying to figure out how to start a podcast.
I had no idea. I was completely oblivious. So I just found like SoundCloud and things like that. And I thought, oh yeah, this could work, right? And a lot of different other podcasts use like Podbean or Whooshkaa and stuff like that. I thought, oh, SoundCloud, it's pretty cheap. It's good to start out with. So I thought I'll start with that. And I think it was free originally until I got to like 25 or 30 episodes in, and you had to start paying $5 or $10 a month. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, no. and then I sort of just tried to learn, because there's this thing called like an RSS feed.
Yeah.
We have to put the link into Apple Podcasts and copy it to wherever you want it to get to. And that probably confused me a bit at 30. I'm like, all right, how do I find this RSS?
Confused me at a buddy.
Yeah.
Fucking 20, 23, 24. Yeah.
How do I find this RSS feed, and how do I get it like across? So I was looking up on Google how to like do that, and I just sort of followed some step-by-step instructions, but that was probably the main thing. But then like probably the biggest challenge like in terms of like creating stuff is like social media and trying to find like the right algorithm and like post consistency and like when to post and that kind of thing.
It's a never-ending battle.
No.
And yeah, it's pretty hard to figure out, I reckon.
How do you figure out like your
Mate, to be perfectly honest, I just don't now.
Yeah,
I just find...
just whenever.
Yeah, I just find... I mean, obviously there's... unlikely that I'm going to throw up a post at bloody 3 in the morning or 12 or 11 or 12 at night, but I just found it's not worth worrying about that stuff, because if your content's good and it's got value in it, then people will find it one way or another. And if you're posting with the focus of, trying to get likes or comments or trying to get the most engagement or whatever, a lot of the time, it kind of takes away from the whole purpose of sharing it in the first place. And you put all this pressure on yourself, and you start to worry about things that really don't matter too much. Yeah. I just find the most important thing out of all of it is that trying to have as much value as possible in your content and just being consistent, because consistency pays off, because most people just aren't consistent, or they might be for a period of time and then they'll get over it, or they'll give up, or they'll go and try something else because it's not growing as quickly as they like. But even with this podcast, like I've talked about a million times on this show before, but it took so long to get any traction. Like I think you would have had more downloads in your first year than what I had in my first 2 years, I reckon.
Oh.
I reckon. It took so long. Like I just made a commitment that I'd put out an episode at least once a week every week, which I've stuck to. And I just tried to really remove the focus from looking at how many downloads it had or how many people saw it on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it was, and just knew that if you keep putting it out and stay consistent with it, then most people won't do that. So there's going to come a point in time where all that momentum and that consistency starts to compound, and then you start to build from there. But I can't remember what the stat is, but I think it's... I have no idea what the stat is, but it was something around podcasts. Like most people don't make it past episode 5 or 10 or something like that. I think it was like 95 or 90% of podcasts
Yep.
that make it past that. So I've absolutely butchered that stat, but something along those lines. So the fact that you're even still going is considerably better than most people in that position anyway.
Yeah.
Who is your dream guest or a dream kind of person to connect with when you look at just anyone in the whole entire world in any sport or any profession? Is there one or two people that stand out for you that would just be an absolute dream get?
At the start, it was like Hutchie, Eddie Maguire, Craig Hutchison, and and Mark Howard probably. Like those were like the four big guys in terms of media, or Andrew Gaze. And once I got those five, I kind of had to like think,
Level
okay,
up a bit.
what's my next step? And since like I had Warwick Giddy, which is Josh's dad, on like in episode 16 or something like that, and Josh was only like 15 or 16 then, and I was trying to get Josh on from that point, like from 16. I was like, this kid's going to be a star. He's playing like Australian national team. I'm like, I've got to get him on, and I've been trying to get him on since he was 15 or 16. So I know him a bit now, and like he walked into the press conference on Monday night, and all the other journos were sitting down. I was standing up, ready for the press conference, and he walked in and he came straight over to me and he grabbed my hand. He's like, Maxie, he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, no, not much. What about you? And he's like, nah. He's like, I'm just cruising. I'm like, this is unreal.
That's
this
awesome.
is like incredible. So at the moment, it's probably Josh Giddey's probably one of my main targets at the moment, but end goal is probably Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan,
Like,
how good would that be?
That's the biggest. That's the
If
biggest.
you get him,
thing.
feel free to refer him across to
will,
me as well, please. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Mate, well, I'm sure your old man, considering you mentioned a couple of times how he's pretty good in terms of feedback and following along with all your stuff, he'd be super proud of you. And you should be super proud of yourself, because the stuff you're doing is fucking incredible, firstly. And I'm super impressed that both times that I've been fortunate enough to come in and join you in SEN have been an awesome experience. And I've come home to Danielle and mentioned how professional it was and how much I enjoyed it and stuff. So you should be super stoked with yourself, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how much you continue to grow over the next few years, mate. And once you make it big time, just try not to forget about the Fitness and Lifestyle podcast and me, and just make sure you get me back on at some point.
I will. I definitely will, Danny. I love chatting to you. And just before we wrap up, we were talking about before, like how you're from Horsham and stuff like that. And obviously, there's like a lot of elite athletes that have come out of Horsham. Were there any specific like programs or anything like that that really helped these kinds of athletes on the way?
It's a good question. I think from the footy side, as we mentioned before, the TAC Cup was a massive stepping stone and building block for a lot of those boys. That's the pathway a lot of them went through. And a handful of them moved from Horsham to Ballarat and either went to St. Pat's or Clarendon in Ballarat as a building block to then move into and it was easier for them with TAC Cup and stuff like that as well. And St. Pat's in particular being like such a well-known footy school, and a lot of the boys went there. Yeah. From the basketball perspective, we were super fortunate to have some really elite coaches, and obviously past players that had made it big time that came back, and just Horsham having that reputation. So guys like Owen Ewan, Steve Bruce, we were super fortunate to have those guys. I always was very lucky, even like with my basketball stuff with my old man, and even Creaky's old man, Jeffrey. He was a big help as well. But yeah, we were very, very lucky to have some awesome coaches that put in the time with the guys who eventually made it to, whether it be NBL, Creaky going to the NBA, which is still absolutely insane to think about. The boys in the AFL. It was very much like a sporting town, and the fact that we had a lot of people that were all trying to make it to that level were really lucky. And then we kind of just had to go to a bunch of different other towns, and the boys that are in the AFL and making it into basketball now, it was just similar to what you said before. It was like doing all the extra work and the early starts and being committed to it, and that's how they got there. But yeah, we were super fortunate.
There would have been obviously a really competitive environment around the town then?
Yeah. I think back now to even when I was still playing basketball, we were in Big V. Yeah. So Lloydie and myself were playing with the Big V team, and Creaky was still there for a season before he kind of went to the Institute and then the NBL and stuff. But our Big V games in Horsham, because we would have to travel to Melbourne every second week to play against the Melbourne teams.
Yep.
Like the Melbourne games, we would have more supporters than the Melbourne team.
Wow.
So you go, when we'd have a home game, it would literally be sell-out games.
Far out.
And then country footy, I feel like, is just like the best crowds. Like
Yeah.
any country footy game, like most of them, particularly if it was two Horsham teams, it'd just be a packed crowd and such good community around it. So it was really cool. We were super lucky.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Max, thank you so much for joining the Fitness and Lifestyle podcast, mate. Like I said, I'm super excited to see how far your journey goes, and we'll continue to follow along with it. And if I can ever do anything to help you out, you make sure you let me know. But to all the listeners and those that are watching this episode, we hope you've really enjoyed this and taken some value from it, some inspiration. Make sure you go and check out Max's show and follow along with his journey. Support the young fella, and we look forward to seeing how far you go.
Thanks so much, Danny. Great to come on, and can't wait to have you on again.
Pleasure, brother.
Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself.